So in 92, Schumacher went to Spa. During the practice session, he actually hit the wall going into La Source, the first tight hairpin there, came across this rim and asked one of the mechanics, what are you doing with that damaged rim? Well, we're going to throw it out. So I said, can I have it? So I took this giant rim 3 miles through the forest all the way back to my campsite, lifted it up like it was like the Stanley Cup, and said, hey, look what I've got, Schumacher's wheel. My dad's like, we're not taking that home. I'm like, yes, we are. And he won his first Grand Prix the next day.
Wow. Darren Jack, the man of mystery.
That's me, I guess.
Yeah. International man of mystery. You're all over the world, man.
I am, and I'm 2003 Paul Tracy's talking to me, or is it 2025? I don't know. You're looking pretty fit, man. It's impressive.
I'm trying. I want to get back behind the wheel some more. So when you're fat and out of shape, when you tell people you want to drive, they look at you and say, well, you don't look like you're ready to drive. Right?
Makes sense. Absolutely. No, it's good to see you. I see you out there on the bike doing your karaoke, and yeah, I'm interested. You got to tell me about your nutrition as well, because surely you're eating good now as well.
Well, I can pretty much eat whatever I want because I exercise so much. So that's the benefit of doing 3 or 4 hours of working out. I mean, I know that you're a fitness fanatic too, because you play a lot of soccer and do a lot of stuff. So
yeah, it's a big part of your life, right? I mean, you get back into it and you find routines and you find you perform better in everyday life, right? Your relationships, your business, even if you're still competing in sport or you want to jump in that race car or do a podcast, you're going to perform better, right? If you're exercising and eating clean.
I saw you. I mean, your posts, for a little bit there, you were throwing around all kinds of big heavy weights and doing like CrossFit stuff. That's stuff you can injure yourself doing that kind of stuff.
Bit of lifting, yeah, helps me feel a bit more healthy at least.
Hey, it's Paul Tracy. Quick heads up for all you hardcore racing fans. Racers got a killer deal right now. Stream the best in motorsports with Racer Plus and get a full year of Racer Magazine. 6 badass collectible issues, all bundled and discounted. We're talking live WRC, Dakar, Crandon Off-Road, DTM, British touring cars, Le Mans, World Superbike, and even the Isle of Man TT, all in one place. Hit up racer.com/bundle and fuel up on all the best racing from around the world. That's racer.com/bundle. Well, let's get into the collection. You're the world's biggest collection of motorsports memorabilia, but it really doesn't stop it there, because you pretty much kind of collect a lot of different stuff. I know that you're into a lot of different sports. You like everything. You like soccer, you like basketball, you like football. Is there anything else other than motorsports that you collect?
Yeah, I've probably built a bit of a collection of different sports. I don't post about it much, or a lot of people don't know too much about that, because obviously with the motorsport aspect, I wanted to build this collection and managed to build the world's largest collection, like you mentioned. And of course, it turned into a full-time business too. So, running the Hall of Fame collection business where we have memorabilia for people to buy. It's my full-time business now. We've got a great staff in place and great partnerships with drivers and teams all over the world. We're always kind of promoting that, but secretly, I always enjoy picking something up for me from basketball, from soccer legends, like you mentioned. I've been fortunate to go to a lot of these events and meet the likes of Muhammad Ali. And ever since I was a kid, I was organized with a nice photo of him to get signed, or Usain Bolt. I've got like his running spikes, really the legends. It's kind of like, I look at them and I learn from them. I study them, whether it's Kobe Bryant, Jordan, Tom Brady, all of the greats from the past, Pele and such. They've got so many attributes that are really very similar, that you can apply to business too, right? So by studying them, you get a lot of respect for them, not just in motorsport like a Schumacher or Hamilton, or say AJ Foyt or Mario on the IndyCar side. But these other legends too, you can learn so much from them, and then getting something for the collection is super fun.
This podcast is brought to you by Racer and Racer.com, the leading motorsports news and information source in North America. With special thanks to trusted silver and gold trading partner and studio sponsor ITM Trading. So I learned looking you up online that I wasn't aware of this. Your grandfather worked on a Formula One team in England when you were growing up. So your father was a mechanic back in those days in what, the 50s and 40s and 50s? Is that true?
Yeah, my grandfather was a mechanic for a British driver who was like a gentleman driver. Back then, of course, you had the Fangios, Ascari that drove for the works team. But there's a gentleman named Ken Wharton who raced. He was a sportsman driver. Essentially, it's kind of like today you've got the IMSA drivers who are pretty wealthy, right? And they buy their own team. Well, they entered their own cars. So Ken Wharton was a mechanic, and he was he had his own mechanic shop, and my grandfather went to work for him when he was a teenager, and he got kind of the bug of racing, and from there, my father, he just, he's just the world's biggest racing fan. I mean, he still is. He goes to the races and takes his own photos and gets them signed and things like that. So it's always been in the blood as far as a passion for racing, and me and my brother, we were kind of introduced to that right from when we were born. It's all we knew was motorsport and everything about it. Never really got the opportunity to compete in it until I was much older. But just as an enthusiast, right from the start, we were always super into it.
Yeah. So you started going at like a very young age. I saw like 3-4 years old. Your first race was a Formula One race in Italy. You just came back from Italy. So the first race you went to, I think, was Imola, was it?
Yeah, that's right. It was called the San Marino Grand Prix back then at Imola, because they would have two races, like Monza would be the Italian Grand Prix. And, I probably attended races even before that, but I remember vividly when I was 4 years old, I went to Imola, and, if you think about what your earliest memory is, it's really hard to recall anything, I think, from age 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe. But, I have strong memories from actually being there in the rain and picking up this giant Ferrari flag, which was like memorabilia off the floor, which I still have, of course.
Wow.
But, getting to see Niki Lauda race and Ayrton Senna in his rookie year. And I feel like even then I knew who all the drivers were, because we were constantly watching it on television in England and studying it through Autosport and things like that. It was just, it was these super giants of the sport that I was getting to see. And I knew how important it was even back then at age 4.
Yeah. So, I mean, you've been around racing since a young age. So what was it like in those days versus now? Like, I would imagine it would have been a lot easier then to meet race drivers, because everything was much more casual. There was, now you go to a Formula One race, I mean, you have to be basically extremely wealthy or somebody important to get anywhere near a Formula One driver inside the paddock or get in a garage. I mean, you have to be a celebrity to be able to do that. So what was that like when you were a kid? Could you walk freely around and meet drivers at that time?
It's a great question. The beauty of motorsport is you've got all different categories, right? So as a young kid, I've got strong memories of being in the paddock, on pit lane, at sports car races, whether it was the Isle of Man TT racing, speedway bike racing. Later, when I emigrated to this part of the world in IndyCar and such, it's always been kind of open paddocks in Formula One. It was still difficult to kind of get near the drivers and stuff then. And, but it was what you did as a kid. You were creative, you found ways to sneak in, you found a Marlboro shirt and a hat that matched and a ticket holder, and you just went for it, before they had the scan systems. So I was in the F1 paddocks, in the late 80s, early 90s as a kid, just roaming around trying to like see if I can get something signed by a driver and pick up some memorabilia. I remember like in 92, a mechanic came out of the back of the garage in Benetton, and he had a couple of visors, and he gave one to me, and it was like, this is Schumacher's visor, like, and they just threw them out back then. So it's super interesting because I've been able to see how memorabilia world has changed within those paddocks as well. You mentioned how difficult it is now, right? You probably know, but I have paddock access, and I've gone from the kid standing at the gate trying to figure out how to get in the paddock, to get autographs, to ask for things, to now when I'm in there, I don't ask for any autographs. It's like it's more of on a professional basis where we'll set up a signing with a driver, and we'll pay them well to do a signing, for an hour. So it's gone kind of full circle, really. But just doing that in the early days allowed me to kind of learn the system and just see how everything worked. It's fascinating. One more thing is, I've seen like a pair of Gilles Villeneuve's gloves that was signed on an auction recently, right? And the guy picks them up and brags about them and stuff. And you probably know this too. Back in the early 80s and late 70s, those things didn't exist. So
Yeah.
That's the knowledge we gain because I've been there to see it. Gilles Villeneuve wasn't signing his gloves back then. It just didn't exist. Even Senna, if he did sign something, it was a piece of paper someone put through the fence. It wasn't a big, beautiful 8x10. It certainly wasn't a helmet visor, and it certainly wasn't a pair of gloves. So having those years in that paddock and discovering them and being around allows us today to see on the authenticity side too, what's legitimate and what isn't.
Do you remember the first piece of memorabilia, other than the flag was your first piece of memorabilia, the Ferrari flag? Do you remember the first pair of gloves or visor you got from somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the one nice thing that I'm lucky to have, right? I always had like a photographic memory, probably just because it's my passion. I've always been really interested in the subject, right? If I was at school, I'd struggle to retain information. Probably like a lot of racing drivers, dyslexic, ADHD, all those things that now kids get help with, right? But in those days, we didn't really get that. But when it was something of interest, I just hung on to it, and I've got every memory of all these pieces. Like my first race used piece was probably 1985. I went to the Alaman TT, so just a year after the first Formula One race. I was 5 years old, and we came across the mountain section. It's a 37.75 mile track. I'm not sure if you knew that, and you've probably seen the videos of those guys on the bikes. It's pretty gnarly, right? But there was a bike pulled up on the side. So on an open road after the practice session, we drive our car on there. We get out and we look at this bike, and Steve Hislop's sitting there. He became a future British Superbike champion, multi-time TT winner. And I went into the road and found some debris. It was a seat from a bike. And I just felt like this is real memorabilia. This is being used in an actual racing event. And Steve was like, that's from Gary Thrush's bike. I looked him up not too long ago, and he did like 2 TTs. He wasn't anyone famous, but I had that at age 5, and I always continued to keep those kind of things. More noticeable, really, or more known, is the Schumacher wheel. I don't know if you're familiar with that story at all. So in '92, Schumacher went to Spa. During the practice session, he actually hit the wall going into La Source, the first tight hairpin there. We were standing at La Source, and my dad actually got photos of it. It was pretty cool. Then I'd been in the paddock in Silverstone, so I kind of figured I've got to get a way of figuring out to get into the Spa paddock, So I got in, did my rounds, went around, got some signatures, things like that, came across this rim and asked one of the mechanics, what are you doing with that damaged rim? Well, we're going to throw it out. So I said, can I have it? So I took this giant rim 3 miles through the forest all the way back to my campsite. I was a skinny 12-year-old kid, I had no food, no drink. I would stay in the paddock for hours, that was just studying, I suppose. And then I came back to the campsite, I lifted it up like it was like the Stanley Cup, and said, hey, look what I've got, Schumacher's wheel. My dad's like, we're not taking that home. I'm like, yes, we are. So carried it on my lap, for 15 miles in a small English car all the way back to back to England, and he won his first Grand Prix the next day.
Wow. Well, I mean, that's I think about the time when I met you was in the late '90s at the Toronto Indy.
Yeah,
You were just the same. You were a guy that was like sneaking into the paddock and asking guys for an autograph or picture sign, and do you have a
yeah.
visor and that kind of stuff. So I mean, what did you follow IndyCar at that time when you were living in England? Was it something that you followed there, or were you strictly a Formula One kid, or did you follow with IndyCar?
It was pretty cool following IndyCar in England because, Mansell
Yeah,
was
yeah. You had the
my childhood
Mansell
hero.
area
Yeah.
in '93, '94. So that's you know,
Yeah. He was the massive name in our household. My dad was, passionate Brit, and it was Mansell everything. So we were Mansell maniacs, if you like, going to Silverstone and seeing him win. And then of course we were one of the first families in our neighborhood to get a satellite dish. And it's pretty cool because we liked the US, and the sports, but we could get Eurosport and we could watch the IndyCar races. And then when Mansell went there, like all the British and the traditional F1 fans were all whining, and we just thought it was great. So we could watch Mansell on satellite and followed IndyCar racing. Of course, you were there with Penske at the time, and it was such an amazing era. You've talked about it recently on your podcast where you had Emerson Fittipaldi. I mean, you've had Nelson Piquet coming over, so you're looking at XF1 world champions competing. Mario Andretti, Michael was doing a year in Formula One in '93, but came back. Alonso Jr. There was huge names. It was super exciting. Big tobacco sponsors, big engines, big tires, big personalities. So when I came to Canada, it was like, yeah, let's go watch IndyCar racing and meet these guys, And I suppose just being around these drivers since I was a little kid, I wasn't afraid to just walk up to you and have a conversation and a chat. And I was a hobby photographer, so I remember like shooting photos. I'd go home at night, go to like Shoppers Drug Mart, pick the best ones, make 8x10s up. So I'd be there till like midnight, go back the next day on the train to Toronto Indy, get them signed. And drivers would be like, "You took this photo? Like, wow, how can I get a copy?" And I'd be like, "Well, I'll give one to you. You got like a visor or something laying
yeah.
around." So I collected visors, and like you mentioned, it was those kind of moments that I got authentic items right from the drivers and felt really cool. And I always thought the helmets were the best. So that was like the ultimate goal, was to own a helmet. But a kid I was in my early 20s, not making much money. I could never try and buy a helmet or figure out how to get one of those. So um, that was kind of the next step really in building a collection, was trying to go after something like that.
So how did you do that? Like, do you remember your first helmet that you had in your collection?
Yeah, I do. Yeah. Um, it was a gentleman named Bill Dennis. So he raced in the Daytona 500. Actually, he won the Daytona 300, I believe, three times, maybe even three times in a row in the early 70s. So I was around that time, eBay was getting popular, and jump on the internet and search for these kind of race use items. And I picked that one up for $20, and I did a little research, and I had a Daytona 300 sticker on the back and his number, and it didn't say who it was. And I was like, wow, this has really been won by a real driver. And then I was able to get a couple more, and I started networking and figuring out, okay, who else wants this kind of stuff? And actually, it was a really cool trick back then. So on eBay, you could follow all the auctions. I remember following one of your race suits. It was like, I think it was a cool green suit, and it sold for like $3,000. And this was probably in 2005. And I was like, that's a lot of money. Who's paying that? So I'd go back a week later to see if they'd left feedback, and they hadn't. I'd go back 2 weeks later. Then I'd send that person a message and be like, hey, you picked up this Paul Tracy suit. If you ever decide to part with it, let me know. I wouldn't come out and just say like, hey, you want to buy my stuff. So then there'd be dialogue. And from there, I kind of networked and built up a clientele and figured out who wanted things, talk to different drivers, buy different things from them, find homes for it, scour the internet. And I didn't have the money just to keep buying. So I'd buy, resell, trade, and kept doing that and kept reinvesting. Perfect example is early days with Dan Weldon. I bought like 3 helmets from him for $2,000 a piece. I sold one for,
they cost more than that. Like I
I
mean,
know.
a helmet now costs $5,000 to $7,000, and a paint job is $2,000 to $3,000, and a radio is another $800-900, and the cost of a helmet now is close to $10,000, completely ready to race. So, you know,
Actually, that's an interesting question for you. Maybe you can give the viewers a little insight, because during the popular days, you as an athlete in the kart series, driving for Penske, you didn't really have to pay for your own helmet like you did when you
no.
started out in karting and in junior formulas. It was like the manufacturers wanted to give them to you, and you could probably request as many as you want, right? Back then.
Well, there was a time, yes, where I started out myself with Bell. And I started in the 90s with Simpson. I used a Simpson helmet when I was karting, and you actually had that helmet that I raced go-karts, and I raced Formula Ford and Formula 2000 with. And then when I went to Penske, they were using Bell helmets, and I started using Bell helmets, and you pretty much got as many as you needed for a season, because they would get beat up pretty bad because there was a lot of stones and debris, and you didn't have the paint protection film like they have nowadays, like the 3M film that everybody puts on stuff to stop the stone chips. So, a helmet would get destroyed in 2 races. So, maybe you went through 5 or 6 helmets a year, and but now I don't know what the landscape of it is now. I get, if I need a helmet from Bell now, they'll give me one, but maybe 1 per year. But I've heard some of the manufacturers now, they don't really give out anything anymore unless you're a Formula One driver. I don't think, companies like Arai and Schuberth and things like that their helmets are extremely expensive. I don't know if they're giving out 10, 15 helmets a year to each driver,
Yeah,
they're certainly not giving me any. So
yeah, it's pretty interesting, actually, even just that side of the business, right? Understanding how that works and how it worked. So even now, to keep the collection going, I've got a large collection with as many Indy 500 starters as possible. I was able to build a collection with every winning driver from 1958 to 2024, 25, I guess, because we have this year's winner. So, basically, the interesting part about it now is, I want to get the rookies as well. But I know that sometimes now they're only using 2 or 3 helmets. And the other reason is, like in IndyCar, you've got the aero screen, right? So the exterior of the helmets remain intact pretty well.
Yeah.
Sometimes they can just change the interior. So they really don't need to change the helmets quite often. And they are very expensive with the carbon fiber and the paint jobs and stuff like that. So it makes it kind of harder to obtain this memorabilia, which in some ways is more fun too. On the Formula One side, it's the opposite. So they're actually providing them with enormous amounts of helmets, and the drivers are pretty smart because they know the value of them. So they're actually being issued a large number of helmets per year, and sometimes they're wearing 3 a weekend.
Wow.
Because they know, my company or somebody else can bring them a big offer. And so it's almost a little sad, though. I think it's better when it was in the older days, and we just had a 2000.
Wouldn't that devalue the, I'm looking at it. If you have so many helmets, wouldn't that bring the value of the helmet down? Because there's really if somebody wore a helmet in practice, it's not really worth anything because it hasn't won anything versus a practice helmet versus a race winning Monza helmet. They're 2 totally different value sets, right?
Yeah, you're right. It's supply and demand, and it totally depends on the driver too, right? So you see Lando Norris helmet behind me. We're lucky to have the exclusive on selling Lando's 2025 helmets, our company, right? So when you look at Lando, because he's so popular, if he's worn it in one single practice session or a race or 3 weekends, it's still a significant value because there's a lot of demand for it. It's coming right from the driver. It's signed. It's well documented with photo matching and things like that. But versus the old days, like we had a Schumacher helmet from 2002, and we know that he only had 6 race-winning helmets. He won 8 races that year, I believe, if I'm not correct. But anyway, he had 6 that he wore, some of them in multiple wins. So we have a helmet that was, won Canada. It was worn in Monaco as well. And there was very few from that season, World Championship season. So it just makes it like ultra mega. And then further, better than that is like a Senna helmet. If you've got any Senna helmet that's documented, it's the next level value.
But what is a Senna helmet worth now? If you have an original Senna helmet that's race worn with his signature, could you have it a signature on it or just a non-signature helmet? What are those worth in today's market?
Yeah, well, it's a great question. I would say the signature adds value to like a Senna helmet, but it doesn't devalue it if it doesn't have one either. Just because they are so rare, it is the ultimate sort of helmet, right? And collecting the bright yellow is, Senna was the whole story of Senna is so romantic, right? 3 world championships, Brazil, the movies that have been put out. So he's got so many fans that the demand is huge and the supply is so small, especially to find an original that's well documented. We represented one and sold it late last year in Las Vegas for a world record, 388,000
Wow.
US dollars. But before you fall off your chair, it's been beat twice since. The most recent sales are 800,000 euros and 960,000 US dollars. So almost $1 million for a Senna helmet now. And it's what I've been predicting for years that it's going to get there. But it's already coming.
So how many total helmets now? I mean, you have suits and you have gloves and you have visors and you have cars and artwork and trophies but like give me a total amount of helmets you have and suits, like driver kits that match together currently in your collection.
Total. So I would say we have about 380 race one helmets. Probably have another 100 that are actually for sale on our website too, which so you're looking at close to 500. Suits probably even a bit more than that. Yeah, and then we like to get matching sets, as you know. It's always fun to get the driver's helmet, the race suit, the gloves, and the boots from same year. So it's always changing. So in the collection, yeah, I would say there's at least 1,000 race use items, and overall in my entire collection of everything, I've probably got 10,000 pieces that I've built into the collection.
Do you have an all-time favorite suit and helmet and driver that like who's your favorite? Is it Mansell? Is it Senna? Is it Schumacher? Is it?
Yeah, Mansell. It's interesting because I have Mansell's helmet from 1990 when he drove the Ferrari, right? The 641. One day I keep saying I'm going to own that car. That's kind of the next goal.
Wow.
But that is, for me, the most beautiful Formula One car from 1990. Just, what an era. And when I look at that helmet and I think like my childhood hero went to battle in that, right? And, you mentioned earlier about how many Grand Prix the helmets would use and such. This one's been used in maybe 4 or 5 Grand Prix, at least one podium. So that's pretty special. When I look at that, I'm just like, I pinch myself. I feel lucky to be able to own such a piece, but I also feel very lucky because I've got items from, guys who became my friends, so many of these drivers now, they've been kind enough to let me have something from their career. Even if I bought it from them or traded them or something. So I've got so many relationships now and with these drivers from the past and present that I look at them and it's like my friend wore that, went to battle. And even, with yours, like I've got a couple of yours, right? And,
Yeah.
I look at them and especially like the 93 one of yours I have, right? We talked about that. I grew up watching that on TV and to think years later, I'd be sitting here having a chat with you on a podcast or, getting one of your race worn helmets. Like, you don't dream of those things, right? As a kid.
If you like this show, hit the like and subscribe button at the bottom and drop us a comment. If you want any guests, special guests, let us know who you want and we'll try to get them on. Yeah. So who's the toughest to get a helmet from? Is there anybody out there that you haven't been able to get anything from? Like, has there ever been a situation where somebody just doesn't want to? Because I know Dario for a long period of time did not sell or get rid of any of his helmets, but he started to in recent years.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I respect those drivers who, everyone's different, right? And so it's very interesting. It's also part of the studying, right? So you got some drivers like Louis Foster, right? I put my logo on his helmet and I got that helmet from him. He's the rookie of the year this year. And he said to me, at the end of the year, Darren, I'm not sentimental. Whatever else you want, we'll figure some stuff out. Like, you don't care about it. So then you've got the opposite. You got Dario Franchitti, who keeps track of all of his stuff and keeps all of his helmets and big respect for that. He cared about them. They've been in all of his races, those kind of things. So it has been challenging to sometimes get somebody in the collection that you want and that gap that you're missing, but it's part of the process. Like I was fortunate to get one of Dario's from a charity auction. And then there's like Joseph Newgarden, Joseph is like, in his younger days was very bubbly and friendly and Mr. Personality, right?
Yeah.
And then he became this sort of hard ass and that was his mentality of winning, whether he'd studied Schumacher or I don't know, right? It worked. I mean, he became a multi-time champion. He won the Indy 500 twice. But what he did is he closed off a lot of these relationships, even with me. I'm not a driver. So, once I was in a charity go-kart in a race with him and we did pretty well. We were teammates. And then he went from that until years later, I was like, so Joseph, what's the chance of getting one of your helmets? And he was just like, no. And then he was pretty funny because, he changed a lot from when he was a young guy. He was like, yeah, Darren, we're going to get one for the collection. But that's part of the fun of building too. You got to find some ways to be creative. Roger Penske and Tim Cindric were building stuff for their archives. They contacted me. I think actually you gave Cindric my number at the time. And I found some things that they were missing for their archives. And in exchange, I got some items. One of them was Joseph's helmet. So finally got it in the collection.
There
and even though it didn't come from him.
So, I mean, let's talk, the business of racing. You go to a lot of events, big events all over the world. You've been, you go to the World Cup, I've seen you at the Super Bowl. I've seen you at the NBA finals. I've seen you at F1, MotoGP. You attend all these events and you're a fan of all kinds of sport and you see the promotion side of a lot of this. I mean, and you're also an IndyCar fan and you saw the IndyCar in its heyday in the 90s of how popular it was and how many fans were there. What do you think IndyCar needs to do to get back to that level again? Because you're at IndyCar races now and it's not attended like it was and the TV ratings are not what they were. So, but you see a whole big array of motorsports, and what is it that you would do differently to make it more popular again?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul. And I believe that, first of all, IndyCar's amazing, right? We love the series. We love the tracks. We love the drivers are great. I mean, there's a list of top quality drivers now in IndyCar, top to bottom. The Indy 500 is an incredible event. It's a great series. It's a great sport. I'm very passionate about it and like to support it in many ways. But you mentioned all these other big events that I go to, whether it's World Cup, NBA finals, Formula One events. The one thing that they have, particularly Formula One, is they've got a very good hospitality level. So they cater to the high end, you know. So if you want to bring in these big brands and big manufacturers, you have to kind of, you know, appeal to them as well, right? So you can only imagine what it would cost for sponsorship to be involved with associated with a World Cup or with Formula One. You know, you're looking at 100 million for MasterCard to come on board with naming rights, right? For McLaren. So, you know, when IndyCar is struggling on the financial side and on the fan base side, there is you know, it's not easy, but there is certainly areas that they can improve. First of all, you got to make it better for the casual fan, right? So you and I are pretty knowledgeable, but if we tune in on a Sunday and there's all these livery changes and we haven't been watching practice and qualifying, we're spending, you know, 10 laps to figure out if Scott McLaughlin's in that Pennzoil car or if that's Joseph Newgarden, you know, and who's in that, you know, red and white car and who's in this car. So the liveries, first of all, should be set. Now, I know that's going to be a challenge because you got one-off sponsors and everything like that, but you have to believe in your brand. So if it was me, I'd say Penske's are this color, the Ganassis are all red, you know, the Andretti's are all white. That's their livery that's set. And if you're coming on board, you can be an associate sponsor or, you know, the major sponsor, but that's your team. I mean, Frank Williams figured that out, right? Like, Williams is always going to be white. As soon as he changed to red, he felt like he lost his identity with Winfield in 1998. So you got to make it easy for the fan to know who these drivers are. And you've got to increase the hospitality level. You've got to make a higher end package for people. There's reasons you don't see Ferraris and Porsches driving up to IndyCar races. It's just they haven't got that fan base, and you have to kind of invest to build that attraction, even within the paddock, right? If you go to Europe and you go to these Formula One races with these giant hospitality units, I would get all of those wealthy team owners to kind of invest in that and to appear higher end. I've brought some major celebrities and athletes to IndyCar races and they've loved it, but they seem to just disappear and they don't come back. You know, there's ways to kind of get them involved and to make it appear that it's a little bit more higher end than it is now.
Yeah, I mean, I completely understand and agree with your point, because when you look at Formula One, you know Ferrari is red and you know Mercedes as black and silver, and you know McLaren since the 70s has always been papaya, and so there's certain colors and liveries that stick to, and that's their brand, like you said, and like you said in IndyCar, the liveries are changing from race to race. And for me and you, we know who the driver is and who's driving each car. But for a casual fan, like you said, they don't. Who's that? That's a different car than he had last week. So it can get, I think, quite confusing, right?
Yeah, exactly. And one other point, I will say that I think it has improved in certain areas. The marketing has improved. The social media has got better. But there's one thing that always bugged me, and they're starting to change it a little bit. Okay. So think about when you want to race, Paul, like, especially in the Champ Car era, there wasn't all these rules. I mean, you'd get out. I mean, I've seen pictures of you getting out the car and you've got your in Mexico City, right? And your helmet's still on and you're celebrating. The one thing I think IndyCar missed out on for years, and they kind of still do, is the driver pulls into victory lane. They tell him to sit there and calm down, wait for the TV broadcast to come back on and this, that, and the other. Okay, now you can get out. Here's a hat. Okay, let's get this Firestone hat on. And now you can celebrate. So you've got like a Rossi, right? Who's just not going to play into that. And he's going to go, yay, one fist pump and that, right? But the emotion isn't there. If you see him pull in MotoGP and you watch Formula One and you see them get out of the car and they've got this helmet on, like, that's what separates them from me. They're this superhuman person with this helmet on, you know what I mean? Versus the regular fan who's they can't walk around dressed like that in a racing suit and a helmet. So you've got this this man who's celebrating, wow, and that's like an impression that should be shown, and let them run loose, let them do what they want. Let Joseph Newgarden run into the stands at Nashville or at Indianapolis. Let Elio climb the fence. Let them do whatever they want, or have sort of more of an organized victory lane. Maybe it's with the top three drivers. Celebrate them more. There was years of watching IndyCar racing on TV that I didn't even know they had a podium until like I discovered it at the race. Like make
Yeah.
the podium famous, play the national anthems, celebrate Spain for Alex Palou, celebrate USA for Joseph Newgarden. Like, let's make it a little bit more international. Let's learn from these other motorsports.
Yeah, I mean, you certainly lose the energy of the moment of a guy winning, and you go to commercial break, and then when you come back, you guys sitting there for a couple minutes in the car, and then they say, "Okay, now celebrate. We're back from commercial." You've kind of lost the energy and the excitement of the moment, right? Like whereas in Formula One and MotoGP, you win the end of a Super Bowl, you don't cut to commercial and then come back, you know 2 minutes later, right? You keep that emotion high.
Yeah. What do you think about IndyCar? You've got some good opinions, and I've been watching some of your podcasts lately. It's pretty funny actually to
Well,
see
I'm the interviewer
modern
here.
GT.
I'm asking you your opinion as a super fan,
Yeah.
right? So I agree. I agree with a lot of what you're saying. I think that you know the one thing that I do love about IndyCar is the accessibility that casual fans have. Like, you can't get in the paddock of a Formula One race, or you can't get in the locker room at a Super Bowl or an NBA game, and you can get really close to meeting drivers and being in the tent, and being right next to the race cars in the pit lane at an IndyCar race. So I think that's one thing that they do very well, but I just don't, I don't understand why people are not more excited about that, because maybe there's more that exclusivity of Formula One where it's the only for the ultra rich. I don't know
Well, if you
what
can't get to them
makes it
too,
so
it's
popular.
maybe a bit more appeal, right?
Yeah.
Maybe a bit more appeal. And it's very difficult to take that away from the fans, that accessibility and that. But even in the 80s, right? I mean, you look at Danny Sullivan with the Ray-Bans and the Miller sponsorship and that, the fans still had the accessibility then, which is, like you mentioned, it's amazing that IndyCar has that. We love the sport, we love the series, but there's got to be some sort of also different level that you can kind of cater to, right? Like, I think the most expensive, I might be wrong here, but the most expensive suite pass you can buy at an Indy 500 is like $2,000, and $2,000 maybe get you a grandstand seat at a good F1 race. It's like there needs to be maybe a $10,000 ticket or a service or that kind of aspect, right? I mean, it takes a while to build that, but it would be nice to see that in the future, where you can offer something that's a bit more exclusive, or attract the attention of those more affluent people, which then will bring in the higher end luxury brands, right? You've got to have both. You've got to have something for the regular fan, don't get me wrong. But I think if they can appeal to them, then they can appeal to the larger manufacturers like a Porsche or an Audi or Aston Martin, Ferrari. You're missing that right now, I think.
Yeah. So to put a cap on your travels per year, I mean, you're at a lot of events, not only just, like I said, motorsports events. How many events a year do you typically go to? Like, are you
So,
every weekend somewhere, or tell
almost.
me how many events you hit a year?
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to get to about 10 Formula One races a year right now, because honestly, that's where the business is. Like, the sport is so popular. What you have to do is you have to travel to be there for relationships. Luckily, we were able to set up a nice memorabilia section at Monza with the Schumacher lounge. So we had his helmets and race suits on display there, some of his cars that were loaned to us by Alessandro Benetton, and also the Mercedes team and stuff. But being at these races is really where you continue to build the relationships. One thing we're working on right now is pretty exciting is our authenticity program. So we want to be like at the track to authenticate in person. Um, so, back in the day, as you know, when you were racing, for the most part, you didn't have time to keep track of all of your equipment. So you'll have like Oscar Piastri will win the Saudi Grand Prix, and in the old way is they just basically would just put all their equipment in a box and it'd go off, and then the next weekend he'd wear the same helmet, or that one would be at home. And it's only when they retire they go, wait, which one was this from? And history's happening at those moments. So we're working on being there at the event, try to work with these teams and drivers in authenticating items. In fact, I have this helmet here, which you can relate to.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this is one of your 2003 championship helmets, but the reason it comes up here in significance is I think maybe by '03 you were getting maybe a bit more nostalgic or realizing like this could be the season, and you started actually hand documenting on the helmet the races that you use this helmet in. So I remember at the time I wanted a championship helmet from you, and you said, well, I've only got two. One of them has 3 wins and the other one has 3 wins. So I said, well, come on, you can give one of them up. So this one's from St. Pete, Monterey, Long Beach win, 3rd place at Laguna and 2nd place at Portland. So again, 5 podiums, a championship, 3 race wins.
Yeah, I have the helmet that won in Toronto and Vancouver still. So the ones that to be honest with you, the ones that I would let go were the ones that if I had a new helmet that I didn't do well in, I was like, okay, I'm getting rid of that helmet. I need a different helmet because I thought it was bad luck. Right. So, but if I was winning in a helmet, I would continue to wear that helmet. And then if I stopped winning or something bad happened, then I would like switch helmets. But, I still have some of the helmets with significant, important wins to me. They're the ones that I still have. Especially if I won in Canada with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you won twice in Toronto and of course you won in Vancouver, but doing that now for the drivers, being able to tell them this is your, documenting that's the future. Especially there's a big opportunity, I think, in the authentication world where racing items haven't been authenticated and they haven't been documented at the time. If you look at Major League Baseball now, Paul, you'll see 2 authenticators in each bench. So as soon as a ball's hit, if it's in their eyesight, it comes back and it's authenticated. If it leaves their eye, then it's not authentic. We want to try and get that program going in racing. And in order to do that, you have to travel to these events and have meetings and try and keep things moving forward.
Well, how do you, when you're at an event, like you have the Schumacher, memorabilia lounge, like how do you secure that stuff from like, do you have to take it every day with you? So, because it could easily get stolen from you. Like somebody could break in and take that stuff.
The nice thing is when you've, done a lot of events, things like that. We have security on hand. Formula One races are very secure, right? You've got all the equipment in the garage ready, so that's being looked over. It's the same in these fan zones and such too. We'll have a nice setup in Austin, actually, in partnership with eBay. We were shipping over a McLaren from our Berlin store, and we're putting a Formula One car in an eBay booth with a bunch of memorabilia, and we have security there. But actually, there are times where they end up coming with me, back on the plane or in the hotel. So it's kind of unique. Sometimes you end up traveling with the stuff, but for the most part, it's just practice being perfected over the years.
Well, it was great talking to you about your collection, and I've obviously known you for it's been almost 25 years now. So it's really cool to see what you've built up, and hopefully I'll see you at a race here pretty soon.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Definitely, I'll have to come out to Phoenix there, maybe for an IndyCar race, and we'll ride some bikes or something.
Yeah. So let me know when you get out here.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.